With Germany's ageing population and changing demographics, there has been a significant increase in the demand for care environments and homes suitable for older people. The development of the senior living market and the response of the real estate sector in Germany to this increase in demand has been researched by BONARD and MoZaïC Asset Management. We are very privileged and fortunate to have Julia Momotiuk of BONARD and Mr. Frédéric Dib, President of MoZaïC Asset Management, to present the findings of this important joint report to us today. So Julia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the introduction. Hello, everyone listening to the recording. I'm Senior Research Manager at BONARD. It's a market research and advisory firm for rented residential asset class. And today, together with Frédéric, we will brief you on the German senior living market. We did this research study last year in cooperation with MoZaC, where we've covered the demand, supply, rent levels, investments in the sector, and would like to guide you to the findings of the report and thus the trends in the market. I will represent a research perspective and show the data points, while Frédéric will comment from his experience with the market. We have 17 slides prepared, covering the key information from the report. Later on, I have an intro slide for MoZaC. Frédéric, would you comment?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this presentation. I'm Frédéric Dib from MoZaC Asset Management. MoZaC is a specialized asset manager in healthcare and senior living real estate. We are active in 4 countries in Europe currently, managing assets on behalf of institutional investors and hoping to be expanding into more markets. We are currently in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, and hoping to go also in Ireland and the Netherlands. And as Julia said, we see the senior living market as a very interesting and rapidly growing market, but we thought that it was lacking transparent and just relevant data. And we thought that we wanted to bring that to the market. And we've done that in Germany, but we are also doing it in other markets. We have another report in France and hoping to do more in different countries.
Indeed, thank you. Another slide is a bit about BONARD. As I mentioned, a market research and advisory firm. We are a global company having offices across Europe, Latin America, Australia, and we do independent and certified research, not only secondary sources, but we also use primary data. We are on site interviewing customers. So going right into the content, briefly, just what was the initiative about? I mentioned previously. It was performed in 2020 as a study on a country level, where we analyzed the whole senior living market of Germany, looking at the 20 locations across the country. Those were selected as the biggest markets by senior population. And it was a study combining primary and secondary data, following the code of conduct. For interested parties, the full report can be downloaded or requested from us. Just few key findings of the study. First one covering the demand side. The senior population in Germany is growing, and the growth will be stronger even later on. The population is aging. The share of seniors aged 60 plus will increase. The research has identified the fact that demand is stronger than supply or pipeline, and the sector is in a very good condition for the years to come, having a lot of potential. Aside from the demand, the objective from us was to screen supply. So what is there on the senior market already? I have to say that we screened those 20 locations that was covering the country market. And there are almost 65,000 assisted living apartments in over 1,300 establishments in the top 20 German cities. I will address later on a terminology, which is the cornerstone for the sector. Several parties in several markets describe this sector differently. So define what is a senior living establishment, what is an assisted living establishment for us was the key. And I will guide you through the terminology later on. But for us to remember right now is the focus of the study was on the private commercial assisted living establishments, where seniors would need a lesser level of care or no care, and they are living independently in those apartments. The total supply of the private commercial assisted living residences was coming up to 22,000 apartments. You can see as a last bullet point here. And then we are moving on to the right side. So over the recent years, private and non-private operators have been focusing on the development of senior living residences outside the largest cities due to the land scarcity and completely unmet demand in those regions. And there are more than 370 senior living residences coming up to the market. So new supply that will be there, that will add up to over 16,000 apartments, with 20% of apartments located in those top 20 German cities that are the biggest, but still there is more offer across the country. Out of those 20 cities, in Germany, Berlin, Hamburg, Bremen, and Leipzig stand out with 5 projects. So those are cities where the interest is the strongest for the new investments and new buildings opening up. And comparing what is on offer in terms of supply and what is the demand in those cities, we felt Berlin and Köln points to the biggest gap between demand and supply, the most potential. And by 2025, the provision rate, this shortage between supply and demand, will decline even in almost all 20 German locations. Frédéric?
Well, just maybe one point for people to understand when we talk about growth of the senior. There are different definitions of senior, and here, of course, the sort of official statistics, we get them for senior age 60 plus or sometimes 75 plus. Just for people to understand, the average age of entry in a sort of assisted living residence averages is around 80, from 80 to 85 years old. So it means that these are people that were born in the 1935 and plus, 35 to 40. So when we are not yet at the population of the population boom, demographic boom post the Second World War. So that means that the actual growth, the real growth, or the very dynamic growth will occur in the next 10 years. And then doing that for the next 20 years after that. So we are really at the very beginning of that very dynamic and impressive growth.
Indeed. And I will talk more on the demand in the next slide. So these were just key findings overall, and we will follow up with looking at each of those: demand, supply, rents, pipeline in the upcoming deck. So here you see the demographic overview. So Germany is well positioned across other European countries to say and stress it one more time that the aging population is a strong trend in the country. In terms of the share of people aged 65 plus, you see that Germany ranked 3rd in Europe after Italy and Greece. The reason behind this aging population trend are high quality healthcare policy, one of the world's lowest birth rates, and a robust social protection policy. As you see, the share of working age population is also expected to decrease in time on the another graph on the right. So before moving later on, Frédéric, do you want to comment?
Just one thing that we don't show here on the previous slide, but we talk about in the report, just to again to emphasize also on top of the growth in population, why there is also an accelerating of growth for demand in assisted living is the rise in the single person household, i.e. more and more households are just made of one person. And what does that mean? What it means is that when you have your parents that you have to take care of, before family households had more 4, 5, 6 people, sorry. Now you have just in many cases one person, and it's of course very hard for this person to take care of their older parents, and that is an accelerating factor for why people also go into assisted living.
Great. Moving on of describing the demand and the customer target group, we've came to the typology of those senior living establishments promised before. So the whole senior living market in Germany was categorized by 3 types. First is the senior living establishments for dependent people, for example, nursing homes. These categories are regulated by the authorities, and we did not focus that much on this type. Rather on the 2 following ones, assisted living senior establishments and independent senior living. Example would be service residences or community living for the latter. So when we talk about market supply, in Germany, over the last 2 years, the annual average growth in the number of assisted living establishments has reached, as you see on the slide, 19%. Nevertheless, the country is still experiencing a significant shortage. Approximately 65% of existing supply is owned by non-profit companies, then 30% by private ones, and the rest 5% operated by public organizations. Over the recent years, the market has been consolidated by the largest players. They have bought up smaller players and invested heavily in the development of their portfolios, so they strengthen their position in the market. The activity of providers has also shifted to smaller cities, where the provision of existing assisted living establishments remains low, than in those big cities such as Hamburg or Bonn and Hanover. The main players at present are Korian, Aloheim, and Johanniter. They constitute the biggest private operators of assisted living residences in Germany, and overall they operate over 300 establishments in 2020. Frédéric?
Yes, just one point on the list of players that we have. The 3 players that you have talked about are also care homes or nursing homes operator, and just for people to understand as well, this is the result of history. Is that traditionally when operators were building nursing homes, so really catering for people in need of a lot of care, really dependent people, they were also building next to that smaller assisted living residences where people were in their own apartments but needing less care, but sort of they were sharing the sort of laundry services and catering services of the nursing home in order to cater for the assisted living. What we are seeing now is the likes of the Convivo and Advita, who are maybe more, and you saw earlier on the definition, you have betreutes Wohnung, which is really more sort of care services, and you have more the service living, and we see these new operators or more recent operators like Advita and Convivo really growing into that segment of more service oriented and maybe slightly less care oriented facilities, and also larger facilities and maybe getting closer to city centers.
Thank you. Next point we have for you is an example of how detailed we scanned those establishments and specific types. So the details from the report were not only put into tables and graphs, but also in interactive maps, such as an example here. There were specific indicators, actually over 20, that we screened for each establishment across the country, where we can see the types that we just described with Frédéric, the brands and facilities they offer, and the product they have. More on the product is put here. So we've analyzed private commercial service residences and type of common areas they have. So when you, as you see on the graph, most of the residences, actually over half of those, they have a garden, balcony, reception, entertainment, common area. Mid part, be it a restaurant or parking, is presented less, and then sauna, a TV room, spa are very rare.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, with the development of the senior, the more sort of the more service oriented residences, I think we'll see the percentages on all these services on the right increase, and even sort of more services being added as the market just develop, and you will have more and more segmentation and diversification in terms of the offering that all these operators will be offering in order to differentiate themselves, of course, and also to adapt to a changing aging population that is more and more, that will more and more require these types of services.
Right. These are a few visual examples of the private, modern, commercial product offer that already exists in the country. And I wanted to briefly touch on the future product. So in total, to remind you that there are approximately 400 residences planning to be built in the senior living market. Those are plans that are already under construction or not yet constructing, but operators already announced they have a site and will start building in the future. Those 400 buildings will cover over 16,000 apartments. And on the slide here, you see a few selected cities where Berlin is leading the way to be of most interest. A general connotation between supply-demand trade-off and how it will be in the future and how it's predicted, that by 2025, the provision rate in all those 20 cities except Duisburg will decline, actually, and create a significant opportunity for the providers to enter the market with a high-quality service, just as Frédéric mentioned, with a lot of amenities, and distinguish them to find high-paying customers.
Again, just maybe to give a little bit of color on what you just said, Julia. If you're just focusing, for instance, on Berlin, we have about 600 apartments that we have found in the pipeline for Berlin. If you just look at the sort of increase of population of the 75 plus in that very same city, and you look at the provision rate, just to keep the provision rate the same, which is at 2.8% for Berlin, you would need about 3,000 apartments, and here we have only 600 being in the pipeline. Just to show you again the sort of importance of the demand that is building, and the sort of imbalance between offer and Thanks.
Few few last indicators would be on the transactions in the sector. We have looked over the activity in the asset class in the recent period. So deals, investments, and developments have approached 6 billion euros, whereas the number and the volume of the transactions were rather modest in the period from 2009 to 2015. In addition to the domestic investors that were present already, the rising demand and the lack of supply have attracted the influx of foreign capital from Sweden, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. And on the slide later on, you can see the yields in German senior living market compared to other sectors, as well as the development of this sector across various locations. The steep increase.
Oh, go ahead.
I see you want to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, because of course this slide is quite important, and when we have presented it earlier, it has raised some sort of questions. Just for people to understand, the nursing home market, care home market, has been more mature, and we have seen a lot more transactions, and the transactions are more sort of covered, and we have more data, and so a lot of some of the transactions that we are showing here are actually care homes transactions, and the yield that we're showing here, even is mostly driven by nursing home, and actually refers more to 2019 transactions. As I think people are aware, the yield have continued to go down, to be compressed, because there is a lot of demand. And so I think that now, the primary yield for care homes would be more around the 4%, and even slightly lower than the 4%. And on senior home, senior living, assisted living, it would be even below that, around the 3.5% mark.
Yes, fully agreed. The trend for compression continues here. Okay, a few conclusive points to wrap up. So senior living market in Germany has been growing, and with further aging population, the demand is expected to grow. High level of income and disposable income will drive that expansion in such market as Germany. Bonn, Nuremberg, Stuttgart are cities with the strongest demand. Pipeline for German markets will be consisting of 370 buildings that by 2025 would not satisfy the even existing and later on growing demand. And last point here, German assisted living market is said to remain one of the most attractive in the EU in the years to come, luring further foreign and domestic investors and developers.
Thank you very much, both of you. That's absolutely fascinating. And I think, as you said then, a lot of opportunities there for investors, both domestic and international. I found that presentation absolutely thoroughly enjoyable and very, very enlightening as to the situation. And I thank you both very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.